What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you with another solo video. Today, we're talking about Week 13 starts and sits. We are at that time, ladies and gentlemen. We are almost at the playoffs. These are must-win games for most of you. You need to get a win to get into the playoffs, a win to improve your seeding, a win to get a bye, all that kind of stuff. This is a very important week of fantasy football. The reason this video is coming to you on a Thursday and not on a Wednesday is because we had a Wednesday football game. Pro Football Focus and a bunch of other sites didn't have their Week 13 information updated in time for me to prepare the show sheet and get this out for you yesterday. But here we are. No time like the present. Let's get right into this. As always, there are timestamps in the description. If you only want to hear about a particular game, you could go ahead and skip to that game. You don't have to listen to me talk for an hour or however long this video goes. You can just get to that game, hear about the player that you're curious about, and all that kind of stuff. So let's hit the intro, and then we'll get right into this game. All right, so before we get into the first game, guys, as always, if you receive any value in this during this video and you feel like you got some information that you didn't know, maybe I said a stat or something that you didn't know about and it helps you make a decision, pause the video at that moment, go hit the like button, or if you want, pause the video right now and go hit the like button. Have a question that you need answered, leave a comment in the description. We will answer your question. We're not one of those YouTube channels that just lets them pile up. We will answer your question. Subscribe if you are new and hit the bell icon so that you are notified anytime we go live or anytime we post videos. We go live before primetime games as well as Sunday mornings. So on bye this week, we have the Buccaneers and the Panthers. So randomly, I don't know why the NFL did this. It was probably COVID related for whatever reason, but they scheduled no buys last week and they have 2 buys this week. So the Buccaneers and Panthers are on bye this week. And that means you obviously can't use Ronald Jones or Mike Evans or Tom Brady or Christian McCaffrey or any of those players. So make plans. This is the last of the bye weeks. We have no more bye weeks as we head into fantasy playoffs going forward. To the fastest paced games of the week. And instead of using Football Outsiders, I had to use RotoViz because Football Outsiders is now behind a paywall, unfortunately. But I do have RotoViz. So I'll go through the fastest paced games of the week for week 13. Broncos and Chiefs, a Sunday night football game, will be the fastest paced game of the week at a pretty fast pace, given that both teams are in the top 10. Washington at Steelers, also pretty fast as well. Rams at Cardinals. And Lions at Bears. So those games project to have the highest pace, meaning that they're going to run the most plays potentially, which obviously means more rushing volume, more receiving volume, more passing volume, all that kind of stuff, which all leads to more fantasy points. So this week, we don't have Thursday night football because we had Wednesday afternoon football. So hallelujah, no Thursday night football this week. We have a number of other primetime games that we'll have this week, but no Thursday night football, which is a good thing. So 1 p.m. Saints at Falcons, the first game we have on the slate for this week. You start Taysom Hill and you start Matt Ryan. So Taysom Hill has low passing volume. I understand that, but hopefully that has been the product of 2 blowouts for the Saints, because the Saints going into this past week, they had a game against Atlanta, or the first week that Hill played, where Julio Jones was not really healthy in that game. They probably knew that they were going to win that game. And then this past week, they played a team that had no quarterback. So basically what you have to think of Taysom Hill is like Cam Newton, except he's in a much better offense. So I think that firmly puts him in the top 12 quarterbacks, because we've seen his rushing volume. We've seen how they use him on the goal line. Unfortunately for Alvin Kamara owners, we've seen his ability to just take runs away on the goal line and all that kind of stuff. So Taysom Hill is definitely a fantasy asset right now for himself, not for anyone else on the team. But Taysom Hill, if you own him, is definitely a startable quarterback. And then Matt Ryan has been rather pedestrian, to be honest. 13 fantasy points per game without Julio Jones in the lineup versus 23 with Julio Jones in the lineup. So if Julio doesn't play in this game, I would say that Matt Ryan is a borderline streamer. If he does play, if Julio Jones does play in this game, then Matt Ryan becomes a top 16 option. You can start him with relative confidence. But Julio Jones is the big key in this game, because if Julio Jones doesn't play, then Matt Ryan sees a significant downgrade, and I think the Saints have a much more favorable game script again. So what everyone's been talking about this week is, what the hell is wrong with Alvin Kamara? Why is he playing so bad? Is it Taysom Hill? Why is Latavius Murray getting so much run? Like, what is the deal with Alvin Kamara? So here's my thoughts on the Kamara situation. From a coaching perspective, let's just think about this if you're Sean Payton. Don't think about this from a fantasy player's perspective, because coaches don't think like us. They don't think like fantasy players, and they honestly could care less what fantasy players want out of Alvin Kamara. This is what Sean Payton is thinking about. You're playing Atlanta in the first game with a new quarterback because your starting quarterback got hurt. with a limited Julio Jones, who barely played in that game. And then you have Denver with no quarterback. And your star running back, Alvin Kamara, sustained an injury the same week that your starting quarterback punctured his lung and cracked a bunch of ribs. So you lost your Hall of Fame quarterback for a bit. Why would you over extenuate Alvin Kamara when you don't really need Alvin Kamara to win those games? Because you have a very capable backup in Latavius Murray. And that's all speculation. And I can sit here and say that, oh, that's what Sean Payton was thinking. But I actually have proof for this because Michael F. Florio, he does this every week pretty much, but he tweeted out in the first half against Denver. This was the first half usage of the two running backs. Alvin Kamara got 63% of the snaps, which is about his usual number. 8 carries, 2 targets, and 38 yards. Obviously, he wasn't very effective, but Latavius Murray was significantly like the 1B in the offense, which he's always been. Taysom Hill got both the rushing touchdowns, which is unfortunate, but Alvin Kamara was the lead back both in this game and in the Atlanta game. The stats for Atlanta, I couldn't actually find the specific snaps, but he did out-touch him by a significant amount, which leads me to believe that he outsnapped him as well. So Kamara finished the game with only 3 more touches and 48% of the snaps. So what that means is the rest of the game, Alvin Kamara was not used against Denver. And why would you? Again, if you're Sean Payton, why would you put Alvin Kamara out there when Latavius Murray was running well? You were already killing this team. You were up, I believe it was 17-3 in the first half, and you scored like another 20 points in the second half. Why would you put Alvin Kamara in when Alvin Kamara has logged 1 out of 6 full practices the last 2 weeks with the foot injury that he's dealing with? Hopefully, he is back to full health, and we'll have to monitor practice reports this week to see whether or not Alvin Kamara will be back to full health. But I am not worried. I'm not worried about Alvin Kamara. I'll tell you this right now. Obviously, he does see a downgrade in terms of his receiving volume because Taysom Hill can run, and he's not going to throw as much as Drew Brees. And the rushing touchdown vultures are always, our concerns are always there for Alvin Kamara. But I don't think he's this like back-end RB1 that people are trying to make him out to be because Latavius Murray's suddenly more involved. I think he's not the number 1 running back in fantasy anymore with Taysom Hill, but I do think he's still in the top 5. So if you have Alvin Kamara, don't panic. He should get on track this week. I have Alvin Kamara, and I'm an Alvin Kamara owner in the league I care most about. So if I'm saying this, then I feel your pain. If you like, because I've won the last 2 weeks, but Alvin Kamara was not a big part of that. So the usual analysis for Todd Gurley, so we'll move into the other running back in this game, is that if he's a fantasy starter because all he needs to do is score a touchdown to get in fantasy relevance. But this is a bad matchup, and the Saints are not one to give a lot of rushing touchdowns away. I believe they've only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns this entire season. So Todd Gurley is also banged up, whether he plays in this game or not. If Brian Hill is the starting running back in this game, do not start him. But if Todd Gurley is in this game, then you can start him as a top 24 running back, but I would temper expectations because this is a bad matchup, and the New Orleans Saints are just not one you can run against very easily. So I'll try and speed through the rest of this since we're already going a long time on this game, but I had to give my thoughts on Alvin Kamara because it's a very hot topic situation right now. So in this game at wide receiver, you start Michael Thomas and you start Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, obviously if he plays. Thomas is the only startable receiver on this team now. With Taysom Hill at quarterback, he sees Darqueze Dennard in coverage this week. He should be able to take advantage of that matchup, and I expect Taysom Hill to be able to get him the ball in what I consider a less easy game script than they've had the past 2 weeks, even though they played Atlanta 2 weeks ago. So Michael Thomas should see a pretty solid amount of volume. He's going up against Darqueze Dennard, as I mentioned. That's a pretty easy matchup. He should take advantage of that, even with Taysom Hill as quarterback. Julio Jones obviously will hopefully be back in this game. For this game, he'll likely see shadow coverage from Marshawn Lattimore if he's back also, because Marshawn Lattimore is currently banged up. If he is out and Julio is back, then Julio is set to see Patrick Robinson, as you can see on the matchup chart there. I guess PFF projects Marshawn Lattimore to be out again. So if that is the case, Julio Jones should be in for an excellent matchup. And Calvin Ridley, he's kind of just been doing his thing. He'll be a fine back-end wide receiver 1 as usual for him as well. To the tight end position in this game, Jared Cook's been absolutely abysmal with Taysom Hill at QB. And I would love to just say drop Jared Cook. He's terrible. But this defense is allowing the most fantasy points to tight ends on the season, the Falcons defense, although they have improved since Dan Quinn's firing. And the pass volume should be higher this week, as I mentioned, on top of the fact that tight end is just so gross that Jared Cook's still a startable option because tight end is that bad. Because it's not like you can replace him very easily. So, like, I'd much rather start Jared Cook than a guy like Trey Burton or Jordan Akins or whatever. So, Jared Cook is still a startable option. I don't really want to start him, but if you have to, then it's a good matchup. So, Hayden Hurst has been ultra consistent. Honestly, outside of the first New Orleans games 2 weeks ago, he's a top 10 guy for me. I do think you need to temper expectations for him because outside of Darren Waller, the Saints just have been very good against the tight end position over the course of the season. I believe they haven't allowed a tight end to get over like 40 yards receiving. So you kind of have to hope for a touchdown for Hayden Hurst, which is very possible in this game. So on to the next one. Browns at Titans. Quarterback-wise in this game, you stream Baker Mayfield, and you can also stream Ryan Tannehill as well. Both teams in this matchup are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position, which makes both guys streamers, with Tannehill inside my top 12 for the week. And I mean, this finally puts an end to the rough stretch that Ryan Tannehill had these past couple of weeks that included Pittsburgh, Indianapolis twice, Chicago, and Baltimore over the last 6 games. So the Titans passing offense had a rough stretch, and it's about to get a lot easier for them, which is good news if you have A.J. Brown going into the fantasy playoffs. It's good news if you have Derrick Henry going to the fantasy playoffs, because easier passing offenses lead to the ball getting moved more, which means more opportunities for touchdowns for Derrick Henry. And if you have Jonnu Smith and Ryan Tannehill, it's also good news for them. To the running back position in this game, you can start Nick Chubb. You can start Derrick Henry, obviously, and then I say you could flex Kareem Hunt. So the Kareem Hunt splits are not great since Nick Chubb has returned. Kareem Hunt has actually not received more than 3 receptions since week 1. So a lot of people, when they drafted Kareem Hunt this year, were thinking, okay, Nick Chubb's the first and second down back. Kareem Hunt's going to be the third down back, and they're both super talented, so they'll be super efficient. But Kareem Hunt has low-key not been very good in the receiving game, not because he's been bad, just because Baker isn't throwing him the ball as much. So that is something to monitor. I don't think Kareem Hunt is like this locked-in top 12 running back like we saw at the beginning of the season when him and Chubb were both in the lineup. I do think he's more so in that back-end RB2 range. I would start a guy like J.K. Dobbins, even Jonathan Taylor in the matchup that he has this week, over a guy like Kareem Hunt, because I think Kareem Hunt, people are kind of just stuck on what he was before, and they're not really realizing he's not that same guy right now. But he is still a great player, and it's a good matchup, so you definitely can still roll him out there. I think Nick Chubb is the best runner in the NFL. You can come at me in this exact game. They have Derrick Henry on the other side of the ball. I still think Nick Chubb is better, because Derrick Henry is a great runner, but Nick Chubb has 3 straight 100-yard games, and he looks absolutely incredible on every single touch that he gets. So Nick Chubb, don't have any worries about him. If you stashed him or traded for him or whatever, he is going to help win you a championship. I can promise you that. All right, to the wide receiver position in this game. A.J. Brown, you start him, and then in this game, you can also flex Corey Davis and Jarvis Landry. I think A.J. Brown is the most criminally underutilized receiver in the NFL. The fact that guys like Cole Beasley have 2 double-digit target games this season, and A.J. Brown has 0 double-digit target games and only a couple with like more than 8 targets, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. A.J. Brown is my wide receiver 3 on the week. He should absolutely smash in this matchup going up against Terrence Mitchell. Denzel Ward is out for the foreseeable future for the Cleveland Browns, so you don't have to worry about Denzel Ward on the other side. I think A.J. Brown is going to absolutely go nuts in this game, and he has a very favorable schedule coming up as well, so he should help bring you up and help you win a championship, hopefully, for someone like myself who has him in my main league. As far as Corey Davis goes, he remains his usual high floor guy, low ceiling wide receiver 3 that you can throw into your lineup, and he usually gets like 7 catches for like 65 yards or whatever. I think they should be throwing those passes to A.J. Brown, but what do I know? I'm not Arthur Smith. On the other side of the ball, we have Jarvis Landry. He proved me smart last week. I went out on a limb and I said that Jarvis Landry and Baker Mayfield were going to have a great game based on the fact that they had been playing bad weather games for the past couple of weeks. And Jarvis Landry and Baker Mayfield definitely proved me right there. So this matchup versus Desmond King, however, is much tougher than the Jacksonville Jaguars slot corner that he played against last week. But the volume that Jarvis Landry saw last week, and I do think it is sustainable. I'm not just overreacting to 1 week. I think he is going to be a high volume guy going forward in good weather matchups, obviously. And that puts him in the range with someone like Corey Davis. And I would actually prefer to start Corey Davis this week because the matchup is better. But I do think Jarvis Landry probably gets more volume than Corey Davis. But Desmond King is a good corner, and I don't really want to mess around with him with a guy like Jarvis Landry. As I talked about with the matchups, I'll just keep them on the screen right now. As you can see, A.J. Brown against Terrence Mitchell, Corey Davis against Kevin Johnson. That should be absolute light work for those two guys. And I think Tannehill in the Titans passing offense should be in for a good outing in this one. Jonnu Smith, it was a bad outing for him last week. 70% of the snaps were him inline blocking, which I'm guessing was a game plan designed thing. Again, like, coaches don't care about our fantasy team. Frank Reich and whoever else made the game plan going into this game was probably like, okay, the Colts front presents some serious problems. Arthur Smith was probably like, we need to keep tight ends into block because we don't want the Colts front disrupting our offense, and we're going to rely on Derrick Henry for this game. And that's exactly what happened, and it worked. So I think this was a bit of an anomaly in terms of the amount of routes that Jonnu Smith ran last week. He ran 59% of the total tight end routes, so he was definitely still the primary tight end. It's not like Anthony Ferkser was running all these routes or whatever. But as I mentioned, this was probably a game plan thing from Arthur Smith. The Colts front presents a lot of challenges, and I don't think that same thing is true about the Cleveland Browns, regardless of how good Myles Garrett is. The Browns are bad against the tight end, basically. So they're 30th most fantasy points to the tight end position. They built the plan around Derrick Henry last week, unfortunately, for Jonnu Smith owners. This week, I don't expect that to be the case, even though Derrick Henry will still likely be very involved. Browns tied for the third most fantasy points to the tight end. I think Jonnu Smith gets back on track in this one. And then Austin Hooper, he had a solid outing last week. He caught a touchdown, but I think he should be a good option this week against the Titans, who are also weak against the tight end position. So both tight ends, I think, are top 12 guys for me, and I think you can fire both of them up pretty easily. So I'll try and speed these up a little bit because those first two were kind of long. But Lions at Bears. In this game, at the quarterback position, you sit Matt Stafford and you can stream Trubisky. Yes, it might surprise some of you to hear that I would rather play Mitch Trubisky than Matt Stafford in this game. But unless Kenny Golladay is back, and I don't really think that's going to happen, he didn't practice yesterday, and I probably think he's going to be out for this game as well. I don't want anything to do with Matt Stafford on the road versus Chicago after a disappointing outing against the Texans, who are much worse of a defense than the Chicago Bears are. Mitchell Trubisky, in the 4 games since 2018 that he's played against the Detroit Lions, averages 28.75 fantasy points per game. So Matt Patricia's gone, which is a little bit of a narrative-y thing, that sometimes players will play better after their coach has been fired, especially a guy like Matt Patricia, who, by the sounds of it, wasn't very well liked by his team. We could see the Lions come out and actually win this game. And I think if you're betting this game, the Lions make a lot of sense to bet on because of that narrative kind of thing. But I think Trubisky is definitely a usable guy in this matchup. I still think this defense is bad regardless of Matt Patricia is there. But again, like I said, we could see them turn it around and have a nice back half of the season without Matt Patricia. So to the running back position in this game, I think we're getting DeAndre Swift RB1 season back. He's still in the concussion protocol, according to Darrell Bevell, who's currently the interim head coach right now. As of today, he said he's still in the concussion protocol, but I do think we're going to get him back in this game. And David Montgomery is coming off his best game probably in the NFL. So I think both running backs are very easy starts for me. In case you forgot about Swift, I'll put this on the screen right now, but reports surfaced early back in week 10 when DeAndre Swift was last on the field that he would be the starting running back of the team. And basically what that meant was that he played 73% of the snaps, got 5 targets, ran basically all the carries for the running back position, and ran most of the routes for the running back position. So in what was considered a negative game script against Washington in that game, where they were up very early, and in his previous role, DeAndre Swift was to be the third down back. So you might have thought at that time that because they were up early, Adrian Peterson was going to get all the carries, but that wasn't the case. DeAndre Swift is clearly the starting back of this team. I think he's going to be a great start as long as he's healthy in this one out of the concussion protocol. As far as David Montgomery is concerned, he's always been a workhorse with 80+% snap share and opportunity share, but now he's actually kind of playing well, and his schedule gets very, very easy. As I mentioned, he is a top 15 running back rest of the season, in my opinion. He's always been a workhorse running back. He always gets the targets, gets the carries, gets the goal line work, but he's actually playing better now. So, and it's an easy schedule coming up. So I think David Montgomery, top 15 running back rest of the season, you should have no concerns throwing him into your lineup. To the wide receiver position in this game, Allen Robinson is probably in for a huge day against the Lions cornerbacks. He's currently set to go up against Amani Oruwariye. Mitch low-key made this offense kind of exciting last week with his antics. I know it wasn't very good, but I mean, it could be a good thing for Allen Robinson that Mitch actually is a threat with his legs, could make things a bit easier. I'm not really sure. This offense is bad in general, but Allen Robinson's a stud. On the other side of things, I'm sitting Marvin Jones versus Kyle Fuller. I know he got 12 targets last week. I get that, but ECR wants to overreact to a 12-target game and put him in the top 30 receivers, but this is a horrible matchup. The Bears have been absolutely locked down against opposing wide receivers, and he's a volatile player. Marvin Jones is a volatile guy, and against Houston last week, we should have expected him to do well. He was going up against Vernon Hargreaves in primary coverage. I can assure you that Kyle Fuller is not Vernon Hargreaves. He has Kyle Fuller this week in coverage, and Kyle Fuller is a much better corner than Vernon Hargreaves. I'm out on Marvin Jones this week. Find better options because there's probably plenty out there. To the tight end position in this game, you start TJ Hawkinson, obviously, and you stream Jimmy Graham. This is great news if you're a Detroit Lions fan. You clearly hit on this pick. TJ Hawkinson looks like a stud. The challenge is now, obviously, to keep him a part of your offense because tight end's a relatively difficult position to just be like, okay, you're a talented tight end, you'll get the ball, because you generally have to scheme around a talented tight end. We've seen teams like the Ravens and the Niners and the Chiefs scheme around their very talented tight ends in a great way. And whoever ends up being the coach in Detroit next year needs to be able to do that with TJ Hawkinson. That's going to be a concern for him going into next year. Hopefully that coach is able to do that with him. But I think TJ Hawkinson could be in for a Kittle, Kelsey, Waller level of player, level of fantasy season next year. But as of right now, he's still a top 5 tight end. So definitely roll him out there. And then Jimmy Graham on the other side of things, he's a touchdown or bust tight end who gets some volume that makes him a top 20 option, in my opinion, but I'm not really excited about playing him. All right, to the next game. We have the Bengals at the Dolphins. Quarterback-wise, you sit not Kyle Allen, Brandon Allen in this game, and you start Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick has been a great streamer whenever he's been in there, and Cincinnati is allowing the 3rd most passing touchdowns this season with 22 total on the season, or 2 per game. So I think Ryan Fitzpatrick is a great streamer in this game. I have him inside my top 18. I would start him if Julio Jones is out. I would start him over Matt Ryan. Just to give you a sense of where he's kind of at in my rankings. I think Fitzpatrick's a fine start if you need one. And in like super flex leagues, of course, he's a great QB2 to have. To the running back position in this game, we don't exactly know how this is going to work out with Joe Mixon quite yet, but Gio Bernard, as it stands right now, is still the starting running back of this team with Joe Mixon out, and Myles Gaskin I expect to be back. So Gio hasn't been good these last couple of weeks, but those matchups have been absolutely brutal for running backs. He's gone up against the Steelers and the Ravens and like just some bad matchups. I expect Gio to get back on track in this one against Miami, who has been a way better pass defense than they've been a run defense. So we saw a couple weeks ago that both Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay absolutely dissected this run defense, and I think Gio Bernard can definitely take advantage of that. And I expect this game to be a bit closer than some people might think. I think the spread on this game is like 11.5. I am easily taking the Bengals in this game because I think they do things well that the Dolphins are susceptible against. So I actually really like the Bengals to cover the spread in this game. But on the other side of things, Myles Gaskin should be back this week. He nearly played last week, supposedly. And if he isn't back, obviously DeAndre Washington was the lead guy with both he and Ahmed out this week. But I'm pretty sure, if not Gaskin, I think Ahmed will also be back for this game. So I don't think DeAndre Washington is worth a stash or worth a pickup in waivers or whatever, because I do expect one, if not both of the other 2 guys to be back this week. And if all of them are back, I think Gaskin goes back to his regular role and gets all the work. To the wide receiver position in this game, Devontae Parker is an every week start as long as Ryan Fitzpatrick is the starting quarterback, in my opinion. He faces William Jackson, and I'm pretty sure all Parker owners are excited that Fitz is the starting QB once again. Just ride the wave of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Currently, Devontae Parker is in my top 20, and he goes against William Jackson. It's a great matchup for him. To the other side of things, we kind of left the Bengals receivers left for dead last week. I wasn't one of those people. I still thought T. Higgins could be pretty solid, and I actually had to start him in one league because DJ Chark was ruled out. So I think T. Higgins is a fine start if you need to start him. The Bengals guys are a bit tricky. I think you can drop AJ Green, first of all, with no Joe Burrow, but T. Higgins proved he's got a bit of that McLaurin quarterback-proof gene to him where he's going to perform regardless of his quarterback because he's a good receiver. So I am willing to flex T. Higgins if I have to, still even in a bad matchup against someone like Xavier Howard, as you can see on the screen. Xavier Howard might be like pushing defensive player of the year considerations the way he's played, but I still think T. Higgins is a good enough receiver when he's not on Xavier Howard, or even in some contested situations, I think T. Higgins can actually win. So I wouldn't be sitting T. Higgins outright. I think he's still a worthy flex play. And I would play him over someone like Marvin Jones, and I actually would play him over his teammate in this game, Tyler Boyd, who has the best matchup against Nick Needham. But I still see both of these guys as top 36 options, and I think you can play both of them because I do expect the Bengals to keep this one somewhat competitive. I don't think Brandon Allen's like a completely terrible quarterback. I think he can actually kind of move the offense a little bit. We saw that last year in Denver, and he actually didn't even look that terrible last week. So to the tight end position in this game, you start Mike Gesicki. He has 5 targets in 3 straight weeks. So let's hope that Ryan Fitzpatrick can continue to feed him. Drew Sample on the other side of things, while he's not startable in redraft this year, he will be one of my favorite dynasty startup targets or trade targets heading into his 3rd season next year. So just keep him on the back of your mind because he was a 2nd round pick. And he has shown some flashes this year. And if Joe Burrow takes a big step next year, we could see a guy like Drew Sample benefit from that tremendously. And I think he is a great, he'll probably go in like the 17th, 18th, 19th round of dynasty startups. So if you have any dynasty startups this offseason, make sure you take a shot on a guy like Drew Sample. I did it this past year with a bunch of guys that everyone wrote off. Jonnu Smith was one of them. A lot of people were writing him off. Like these 3rd and 4th year tight ends, man, like I'm telling you, that's when they break out. So Drew Sample next year, going into next year, he's going to be a guy that I'm willing to take a dart throw on in dynasty leagues and probably even redraft leagues as well. To the next game, we have the Jaguars at the Vikings. In this game, you can sit Mike Glennon and start Kirk Cousins. Glennon, low-key, might be a decent play in GPP DFS lineups. He performed last week, and he should get Chark back. So I don't think Mike Glennon's actually a terrible play if you had to play him. Although, hopefully, you're not in a situation where you do have to play him. I do think he's more of like a DFS type guy, especially that he's getting DJ Chark back, as I mentioned. But the quarterback 5 over the last 4 games has been Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has had high yardage and multiple touchdowns, including 3 touchdown games over the last 4. So he's been excellent, and I expect that to continue this week against Jacksonville because Jacksonville's defense is terrible. Do I expect it to continue for Kirk Cousins in week 14 against Tampa Bay? Absolutely not. But I do think this week he is going to be inside my top 12, and he's a great start if you need someone that could even be available in your leagues, to be honest, because he has that kind of stigma around him that he's not very good, but he's been great for fantasy these past couple of weeks. To the running back position in this game, you start James Robinson and you start Dalvin Cook. It's a little nerve-wracking, in my opinion, as a Dalvin Cook owner in the league that I have the best team in, that he keeps taking these big shots. Like, it looks like he's getting injured every single game. And it's that time of the year where Dalvin Cook is normally injured. Normally every year where it's not like, and I probably should have recognized this going into the season. This might've been a fault of my own, but Dalvin Cook is never injured at the beginning of the year. It's always like week 12, week 13 that he's injured. So it's getting in scary territory. And Gary Kubiak came out and said that Dalvin Cook is banged up right now, which is not a good sign if you have him. And he's probably one of the big reasons why you're in the fantasy playoffs, as he is for me. But the fact that he's banged up right now is not a good sign. So make sure you have Alexander Mattison on your roster, because Dalvin Cook is like one big shot away from being out for the year, in my opinion. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, you're still starting him, but it is a little bit scary. And I'd imagine you can't trade him, and I probably wouldn't trade him. But it's just something to keep on your mind. On James Robinson, I become known as the James Robinson hater because I said he's going to have a rough stretch of games upcoming. That includes Baltimore and Chicago week 15 and 16 in the fantasy playoffs and fantasy championship. So unfortunately, if he helped you get to the playoffs, which he probably did, he might disappoint you once he's there. So that's just something to keep in mind about James Robinson. I don't think he's matchup proof. I've heard people say that. I don't think he's matchup proof at all. The Jags offense has Mike Glennon starting as quarterback. And James Robinson is a good running back. I don't think he's an elite running back. And this offensive line isn't very good. And the offense in general isn't very good. So I don't think he's some matchup-proof guy. So just keep that in mind about James Robinson, is that he might disappoint you down the stretch because he has a tough schedule. To the wide receiver position in this game, you start Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen with absolute ease, and DJ Chark if he plays. So this is week 13 that we're talking about right now. This is the week that people need to be winning to get into the playoffs. They need to be winning to get buys. They need to be winning to get seeding, all that kind of stuff. I am not screwing around with Laviska Shenault or Keelan Cole in week 13. If Chark plays, he's the only Jags receiver that I am willing to start. I am not starting Laviska Shenault and Keelan Cole in a redraft league. If maybe you can start Laviska Shenault in like a DFS tournament or something, but I'm not starting him in a redraft league if DJ Chark is out. I just don't trust this offense. I don't trust Shenault enough to be able to do that in a must-win game for most people. To the Viking side of things, both Thielen and Jefferson are in my top 8. So you can fire them up, and they should be excellent. As you can see on the matchup chart right there, not only do they have great matchups, but Chad Beebe also has a great matchup. So this could be a game where, unlike the Dolphins and Bengals game, I think this game could be an absolute blowout for the Vikings. With the way that Jefferson and Thielen have been playing prior to Thielen going on the COVID list, I think these two guys are just going to absolutely wipe the floor with Trey Herndon and Luke Barku. Like, who the heck is that? Like, I think this is going to be a freaking blowout by the Vikings receivers. To the tight end position in this game, you start Rudolph if Irv Smith is out again. Eifert is not bad as a desperation start. 8 targets last week for Kyle Rudolph. He's going to be a top 15 option the rest of the season if Irv Smith continues to be out. Although I do think Irv Smith next year is going to be a guy like Jonnu Smith, who I'm really high on and probably a lot of people are down on. He's going to be a guy that I think you can get late or cheap in dynasty leagues that could break out next year. But either way, Kyle Rudolph, as long as he is the starting tight end for the Vikings, is going to be a top 15 option that has pretty good touchdown upside. And as we've seen, he's actually getting some volume as well. And this should be a high scoring game for the Vikings. So I like him as a tight end. I think he's tight end 13 for me in my rankings. To the next game, we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Houston Texans. To the quarterback position in this game, you can low end stream Phillip Rivers. If you want to trust Phillip Rivers, be my guest. He's been solid and this is a good matchup, but I'm in a must-win game where I have Phillip Rivers in the Superflex league. but I'm not playing him because I don't trust Phillip Rivers. He's just a guy that's very erratic with his play, and I don't think I can trust him. So I'm going to play Mike Glennon over him, to be honest, because I think they're in a position to throw the ball a lot. And then on the other side of things, Deshaun Watson, you start him, but this is big concerning for Deshaun Watson. Obviously, we all know that Will Fuller is out for the year with a suspension. He got suspended for PED usage or whatever kind of situation he was in. That definitely caps Deshaun Watson's ceiling, and it lowers his floor, especially going forward. The rest of the season, Deshaun Watson has bad matchups the rest of the season, except for Week 16 against Cincinnati. So he moves to my quarterback 8 for me this week, and that honestly might even just be out of respect. If it wasn't Deshaun Watson, I might even move him lower than that. But he's been so good this year, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But this is a bad matchup, and he's now without Will Fuller the rest of the year. Brandon Cooks is a good receiver, but that's not enough to carry this passing game. So Deshaun Watson's going to have to really be Superman if he wants to continue to be the top 5 quarterback he's been. To the running back position in this game, Jonathan Taylor should be a starter in this one. If he is back for this week, he doesn't actually have COVID-19. I know some people were like, oh, he has COVID. No, he doesn't have COVID. His girlfriend had COVID, and he was a close contact. So he hasn't, as of now, actually tested positive for COVID-19. So he should be back for this game. A reminder for those of you that forgot, he had a 26-touch game against Green Bay before he was out last week. And this matchup is just as juicy as Green Bay. Houston has allowed just absolutely bonkers production on the ground to running backs. And especially if Taylor's skill set, a guy who can break tackles and house long runs, this should be a great spot for Jonathan Taylor to smash. And I think he's a great option in this game. Sit Nyheim Hines. I'm sick of Nyheim Hines. He's like, I'm pretty sure he was like 25 in ECR. Just get out of here with that. Nyheim Hines, you're never going to be able to predict when to start. Anyway, just don't start Nyheim Hines, especially in this important of a week. Duke Johnson, on the other hand, I don't think David Johnson's going to be back for this game. He's eligible to return from IR, but I think we would have already seen that if that was the case. I think they would have activated him earlier this week, and we haven't seen that happen yet. So as of right now, I think Duke Johnson's still going to be the starting running back for the Texans this week. He was ineffective on the ground, as I predicted last week. I said Duke Johnson's not a good running back. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But he caught a big receiving touchdown and made me look kind of stupid. Obviously, he's a flex play, but I'm still willing. I'm not willing to fully buy in. I don't think he's that good. He caught a lucky touchdown last week. Shit like that's going to happen sometimes. I still think he's going to be ineffective on the ground, especially against the Colts defense in this one. I think he's going to be terrible this week if I had to guess. But he might catch a couple passes, catch a touchdown, and make me look stupid again. So I still think he's like a top 30 running back, but I'm really not willing to trust him. Wide receiver wise in this game, the only guys that you can trust are Michael Pittman Jr. and Brandon Cooks. If you start T.Y. Hilton, you probably deserve the 3 for 17 that you're going to get. I don't care that he gets Vernon Hargreaves in coverage that we saw Marvin Jones tear up. Pittman is the only guy that you can trust in this offense because he's the best receiver in this offense. He's been getting the most volume as of late. And I know he had a bad game last week, but he still had 9 targets. And he's set to see Keon Crossan in coverage. So I think Michael Pittman Jr. is a fine start as a top 36 wide receiver option. I know ECR actually has him in the top 30. I'm not really willing to go that far. I still think he's got a bit of risk to him, but I think he's a fine start in this one. Brandon Cooks with Will Fuller out, now set to see Rocky Sin in coverage, as you can see there. You can see he's the only receiver worth a damn on the Houston Texans to start. I'm not getting cute with Kiki QT or Isaiah Coulter. Like, just don't even go there. I know Deshaun Watson's a great quarterback, but I don't think he can elevate those other two guys enough to make them fantasy relevant. Brandon Cooks has the best matchup on the field. I expect him to have a pretty high target game in this one. He could very well be a very great option this week and have like a seven catch, like 110 yard and a touchdown game and be awesome. But you might have to temper expectations because Cooks is a downfield option, and this is a great pass rush that the Texans are going up against. In the to the tight end position in this game, sit all the tight ends. Akins and Fells don't interest me, even though Will Fuller is out. And they've had some decent usage the past couple of weeks. I just don't trust these guys. Same goes for the Colts tight ends. I know Trey Burton, for whatever reason, some people like him, but he gets 30% of the snaps every week, and he catches like 1 touchdown, and ECR vaults him in the top 15 range. So he's a low-end streamer. If you want to throw Trey Burton into your lineup, be my guest, but you should have better options out there to play. And I would even throw in a guy like Jared Cook over a guy like Trey Burton, just because I've seen Jared Cook do it for a longer period of time, and I know he's the starting tight end. All right, to the next game, Raiders at Jets. I know Derek Carr is no one's favorite fantasy quarterback right now because he basically ruined everyone's lineups, but I think the Falcons are better than people think. I think everyone just overreacted. They're like, okay, Derek Carr did well against the Chiefs. The Falcons are a terrible defense. Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback. I think that was just a bit of an overreaction by a lot of the industry. And I'll show you what I mean, because The Falcons, I tweeted this out a couple of days ago, but the Falcons were allowing 30.67 points per game from weeks 1 to 6, which is when Dan Quinn was still the coach, which was the second most in the NFL, I believe only behind the Dallas Cowboys. And after Dan Quinn was fired in week 6, the Falcons defense is allowing 19.4 points per game, which is the 30th most, which is a huge, huge difference. That's second worst in the NFL to third best in the NFL. And not only that, that's all good fun. That could be skewed by like who you play and all that kind of stuff. Per PFF, they rank 12th in total defense, 15th in coverage, and 8th in pass rush. So that just proves that regardless of who they're playing, they're actually playing a lot better, and they're not this pushover defense that they were at the beginning of the season. So I'll roll Derek Carr out there with confidence against the New York Jets, because the New York Jets are actually a very bad defense. They're giving up top 10 fantasy points to the quarterback position. I think this is a much easier matchup than last week's was. And I think that was an oversight by a lot of the industry, that the Falcons have been a lot better. And this tends to happen. I think the Seahawks are kind of in this conversation as well. They've been a lot better than what they were at the beginning of the season, and everyone kind of just gets trapped. They're like, oh, in week 1 to 4, the Seahawks, Falcons, and Cowboys were the worst defenses. That's the case the whole season. When things change, man, teams get better, new coaching staffs implement their system, players learn it better, all that kind of stuff. You have to look at recent data when it comes to defenses, and recent data shows that the Falcons defense has actually been quite good. So definitely just be aware of that going forward, that the Falcons, Seahawks, and Cowboys defenses, maybe not the Cowboys, they're still pretty bad, but those defenses have gotten a lot better. Anyway, to the running back position in this game, Josh Jacobs, we got some news on him. Gruden said there obviously is concern when asked about Jacobs' ankle, but Ian Rappaport came out and said that the injury is minor and that he could play this week. So Jacobs is tough as nails. If you don't know anything about Josh Jacobs, he lived in his car for a couple of years. He is tough as nails. Definition of a Raider, basically. My guess is that he doesn't practice much this week. He probably doesn't practice Wednesday, doesn't practice Thursday, and then limited practice Friday, but he plays because the dude's just tough as nails. But if he doesn't play, Devontae Booker is a great add as a high-end RB3 if Jacobs misses this game, which I don't anticipate happening. Speaking of high-end RB3s, Frank Gore came up with 21 touches last week, and I expect similar volume from him this week. So I think you can fire him up with relative confidence. I know it's a bad offense, obviously, but Frank Gore's getting the volume, so that's going to make him a usable running back. To the wide receiver position in this game, am I excited to start any of them? No. But Henry Ruggs starting to get a full workload of snaps. He ran 75% of the snaps last week. Ran the second most routes of the season against one of the friendliest defenses for fantasy wide receivers in the New York Jets. Makes him a dart throw type play if you're willing to play him, or again, like a DFS type play. But same thing on the other side with Brashad Perriman and Jamison Crowder. They've shown flashes of high volume. Crowder earlier in the season and Perriman recently. 7+ targets in 2 of the last 3 games and 3 touchdowns over that span for Brashad Perriman. So any one of these 3 dudes are desperation plays at best. They're all in my top 45, but none of them are in my top 35. So you can use them. I don't really feel excited about any of them, but Brashad Perriman going up against Damon Arnett's not a bad matchup. Jamison Crowder against LaMarcus Joyner, not a bad matchup. Denzel Mims, if you want another dart throw, not a bad matchup for him. And then on the other side of things, you have Henry Ruggs against Lamar Jackson, not the Ravens quarterback. And he should be able to take advantage of him there. Like any one of these receivers in this game could play well. The question is who, obviously, because I think any one of the Raiders receivers could do well. Any one of the Jets receivers could do well. It's more about risk mitigation because there's no clear number one on any of these teams. So just keep that in mind if you're willing to start any of them. To the tight end position in this game, you obviously start Darren Waller. Darren Waller, it goes Kelsey, tier break, Darren Waller, and then tier break everyone else. That's just basically how the tight end goes. If you have Darren Waller, you're very lucky that you don't have to worry about the tight end position. The 4 p.m. games, Giants at Seahawks. Colt McCoy is a sit. Russell Wilson is a start. Likely no Daniel Jones in this game. MRI on his hamstring came back negative, and apparently he could come back sooner than we think. We probably thought he would have been out for the season. He does have a long shot chance to play in this game, but I don't expect him to play. So Colt McCoy is probably going to get the start at quarterback, and DJ might be back next week or the week after. Which is good news, or I guess not good news, but if you have a guy like Evan Ingram, it's better that Daniel Jones is on the field than Colt McCoy because he's a better quarterback. As far as Russell Wilson goes, this is a bad stretch for Russell Wilson. A lot of people are overreacting to this, in my opinion. I've heard a lot of people say Russell Wilson is had 3 bad games now. Is he a back end streamer? No, he's still Russell Wilson. He's allowed to have bad games. The Los Angeles Rams, who he had a bad game against, are a great defense. The Philadelphia Eagles, who he had a bad game against, are a much better defense than they're given credit for. So I think in this game against the Giants, who are also a pretty solid defense, he's still a startable quarterback in the top 5, though, in my opinion, going forward for this game and for the rest of the season. Hopefully he can get his shit together heading into the playoffs, because he likely got you to the playoffs if you have him. To the running back position in this game, you start Wayne Gallman and you start Chris Carson. A whopping 29 opportunities for Wayne Gallman last week has now formed a trend that anytime Devontae Freeman is out, Wayne Gallman's a 60% snap share, 20 touch, high volume, goal line rushing feature back. That's basically what Wayne Gallman is when Devontae Freeman is out, and you shouldn't hesitate to start him as a mid RB2 over guys like Duke Johnson or Myles Gaskin this week. So if you have Wayne Gallman, he's in my top 20 again. He was in my top 15 last week. It's a bit of a harder matchup this week, but I still think he's a great option if you have to start him. And then Chris Carson on the other side of things, he saw most of his work taken from Carlos Hyde last week, but I'm really not concerned about that, because generally speaking, RBs are eased in when coming off of a multi-week injury, which Chris Carson was coming back from. So I expect Chris Carson, he got a taste of it last week, and then he's back to his full workload this week, which is usually like a feature back type role. To the wide receiver position in this game, we have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett automatic starts. And I also think Sterling Shepard is a great start in this game. And Darius Slayton's is kind of like a low-end flex play. I actually listened to a podcast that said Tyler Lockett was a boomer bust wide receiver 3 type flex play. And I actually almost spit out my water. Like I was drinking a bottle of water and I heard someone say that and I almost spit it out, because I actually shut the podcast off after listening to that. I can't believe that someone actually thinks that Tyler Lockett is a wide receiver 3. Yes, he has down games. I understand he has down games, but everyone has down games at the wide receiver position, including the elite guys. Anyone outside the top 10 wide receivers has down games like 30 to 50% of the time, and including some of the elite guys like DK Metcalf. Of that time, you never sit Tyler Lockett. That's basically the role of this. You just never sit him, because he will go off on your bench if you sit him. And that everyone knows what it feels like to bench a guy who drops 40 points. It sucks ass, and Tyler Lockett is very capable of doing that on a weekly basis. So you can't sit Tyler Lockett. Yes, it's going to suck if he has a bad game, but you have to take the bad to get the good. That's just how it works with Tyler Lockett. He's not uber consistent, but neither are 20 guys that I can name right now. In terms of matchups in this game, you have DK Metcalf 100% will be getting shadowed by James Bradbury. I don't care, because DK Metcalf is absolutely wiping the floor with every and any corner that he feels like wiping the floor with. And then Tyler Lockett in this game, Darnay Holmes is a freaking cupcake matchup for him. He should get back on track in this one. So if he disappointed you last week, make sure he is in your lineup this week, because he is not going to disappoint you this week. Sterling Shepard on the other side of things has actually been the much safer option to Darius Slayton. He's seeing 8+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. Darius Slayton has the ceiling. We've all seen it. He can catch a 60-yard touchdown, and he's at the tail end of my top 40. So I think he's usable in a game where generally speaking, the Seahawks aren't a tough defense to get points to the receiver position. They've gotten better, but they're still a pretty bad defense against the receivers. So that makes Slayton usable. But Sterling Shepard, I have at 30. He's actually my start of the week this week. He saw 4 of 10 targets that Colt McCoy threw last week. And Colt McCoy is kind of like a check down Charlie type quarterback. And Sterling Shepard has like a relatively low ADOT. So I think he could have like a double-digit target game this week. And if you're in any kind of PPR league, that's going to be money type of points for you if you have Sterling Shepard. And he's going up against Shaq Griffin this week, who's kind of been up and down this season. Darius Slayton against Trey Flowers. Golden Tate I have no interest in against Ugo Amadi, but I do think Sterling Shepard's a great start this week if you need someone, and especially if you're in a full PPR league or a half PPR league. To the tight end position, speaking of great starts, damn, Evan Ingram actually turned it around. 9+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. That's elite volume for tight ends. The offense obviously sees a downgrade with no Daniel Jones, but Ingram has recording his first 100-yard game of the season last week. Definitely helps secure his role. My tight end 5 on the week. I think he's actually just playing better. He was always getting the targets, even back early in the season, but now he's getting better targets. They're further down the field, and he's actually catching them, which also helps, and doing some things after the catch. So Evan Ingram, locked and loaded tight end 1 for this week. All right, to the next game we have here. We have Rams at Cardinals. Quarterback-wise in this game, you start/stream Jared Goff. You start Kyler Murray. Goff and the Rams, since week 6, have been passing the ball at a 61% rate, which is 7th most in the NFL over that span, which is a huge, huge difference from early in the season. Earlier in the season, we saw them running the ball at like a 53% rate and barely throwing. They were throwing at like Ravens level from last year. They were just not throwing the ball, and it really hurt guys like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. I think Going forward, Woods and Cup definitely are more so back in line with what we thought of them preseason than what we thought of them earlier in the season, because both of those guys need pass volume. They're high volume type run after catch receivers. They're not going to catch 70-yard touchdowns unless it's like a 10-yard slant route that they take to the house. So they need volume, and it's good news for them that Goff and the Rams offense is starting to give them that volume. On the other side of things, you got to monitor Kyler Murray's AC joint injury. He hasn't looked the same the last 2 weeks that he's played with it, or the last 3 weeks. I can't remember when he sustained it. I think it was against the Seahawks. So just keep that in mind with Kyler Murray, is that he's not quite playing at 100%, but you still start him if you have him. To the running back position in this game, you sit the Rams running backs because they're a complete mess, and you start Kenyon Drake and low-end flex Chase Edmonds. The Rams split is absolutely wild on a week-over-week basis. One guy will lead in snaps, which is Malcolm Brown last week. Another in touches, which was Cam Akers last week. Another in yards, which is Cam Akers. One gets a goal line touch with Darrell Henderson. Like, it's just completely, you're never going to be able to predict this unless we see a big-time seismic shift in philosophy from Sean McVay, which I think the only case of that happening will be if Cam Akers eventually just becomes a feature back, which I don't anticipate happening if you have Cam Akers. I'll sit them all until further notice, unless one of them gets injured or Sean McVay just makes Cam Akers a starting back, because I think those are the only two situations where you'll be able to start one or the other confidently. To the other side of the ball there, we have 55%-ish snap share, 15 to 20 touches, and the goal line work is exactly what we expect out of Kenyon Drake, and that's what he got last week. He should be a locked-in RB2 for you. I think you should have no worries with starting him, even though it is a tough matchup. He does project to get most of the volume. And then Chase Edmonds, we kind of know what his role is. He's kind of like a better version of Nyheim Hines, basically, except he's actually good at football. So to the wide receiver position in this game, we have the Rams receivers, as I mentioned. You start them both. DeAndre Hopkins, you start, and I would sit Christian Kirk. I have no idea what the obsession with Christian Kirk is in ECR. He's inside the top 28 for ECR. This is a horrible matchup. The Rams pass D has been just been very, very good. Darius Williams and Jalen Ramsey both have a case to be in the Pro Bowl All-Pro conversation. I think he's had, Christian Kirk's had 2 games this season where he's been good. This is a bad matchup against a great pass defense. He is not sniffing my lineup. D-Hop, on the other hand, he is DeAndre Hopkins. He will most definitely see Jalen Ramsey on every single route that he runs, so that hurts him. But DeAndre Hopkins. You can't sit him. To the Ram side of things, the opposite side of the coin, obviously, for the Rams is that they're in great matchups. You're likely to see Patrick Peterson on Robert Woods, which could downgrade him, not because Patrick Peterson's playing overly well, but because Patrick Peterson has so much respect and name cachet that sometimes quarterbacks don't throw at him. But this could be a Cooper Kupp game as a result of that. You see Woods against Patrick Peterson, Cooper Kupp in the slot against Byron Murphy, Josh Reynolds or Van Jefferson. I'm not interested in those guys, but that's the other matchup for Drake Kirkpatrick. I think both Rams receivers are inside my top 20, though, so feel no hesitancy about starting those guys. To the tight end position in this game, you sit any and all tight ends in this game. Not interested in Higbee or Everett. This is a tight end committee that's not receiving consistent volume to the position, so I will stay away from both Everett and Higbee. And then the Cardinals, never start a tight end on their team. All right, to the Patriots at Chargers, and I know this is going long, but there's a lot of games this week, and this is an important week, so I figured I'd delve into each one of them deeply because it's very important. I'll probably be doing the same for the rest of the season, considering that it's playoffs. So, Patriots at Chargers. Both quarterbacks are top 16 starts at the position, in my opinion. Herbert finally had a letdown game this week after just being on fire for the past, 3 months. But he should bounce back. And Cam, while not an excellent option, has a decent matchup against the Chargers pass defense. And I think he should bounce back as well. Herbert is in my top 6 and Cam at 16. So they're both startable quarterbacks there. To the running back position in this game, Damian Harris is coming off a bit of a down performance, but he logged his highest snaps, 64% on the season with Rex Burkhead out. James White caught 2 touchdowns, but I'm not chasing that production. Don't worry. Don't ask me about James White. He's basically just like Nyheim Hines. He's a guy you're never going to be able to predict when he goes off. He wasn't overly involved more than usual. He kind of had his normal role. He just happened to catch 2 touchdowns. So Harris still remains a solid RB2 in this offense. I think he's an RB2 for fantasy, and he's the only one I want to start from the Patriots for fantasy purposes. Austin Eckler. Welcome back, Austin Eckler. Bell cow usage from him last week. As you can see from Graham Barfield's tweet right here, 73% of the snaps, 14 carries, 16 targets, 31% target share, handled 4 of 6 of the red zone opportunities. I know it's unfortunate Josh Kelly got the touchdown, but in terms of opportunities, Austin Eckler had the opportunity to get touchdowns. led all running backs in routes run across the entire league at 37 last week. So Austin Eckler, if you held him, if you traded for him, if he was in your IR spot, is about to pay off big time. And I could not be more happy about that, being that I was a guy who was all the way in on Austin Eckler coming into the season. So much so that I have him in 5 of my 7 leagues. So he's a guy that I stashed all season, and he's about to pay off big for me, I think, and in the form of a fantasy championship or two. So to the wide receiver position, you start Keenan Allen, you sit Mike Williams, you sit Jacoby Myers. So basically what I'm saying in this game is you sit everyone who's not named Keenan Allen. It's not an ideal matchup for Jacoby Myers, even though it's a solid matchup for the passing game in general. Chris Harris Jr. is coming off of his injury, and he's playing the slot, and Jacoby Myers just isn't good enough as a receiver to beat Chris Harris Jr. In my opinion, Chris Harris Jr. is probably one of, if not the best nickel corners in the NFL. And Jacoby Myers is just kind of like a solid piece. Like, I don't think he's like a great receiver that can beat elite corners. So for the Chargers guys, Williams will see a shadow from Gilmore. And in two wide sets, J.C. Jackson will be on Keenan Allen. When Keenan Allen moves into the slot, it'll be Jonathan Jones on him. But the Pats are a bad matchup for receivers no matter what alignment they're in. So sit everyone except for Keenan Allen is basically my point, especially Mike Williams, because Stephon Gilmore, while not playing at an elite level like he did last year, is still a great corner, and he's good enough to lock up someone like Mike Williams. So at tight end in this game, Hunter Henry is a high floor option at tight end. We're starting to see his ceiling more and more. Hopefully he can sustain that type of play and red zone usage, but he's inside my top 8. You should feel no qualms starting him, and he actually might have a great game in this one, given the fact that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen might have a bit of a tougher time. All right, Eagles at Packers. In this game, you sit Carson Wentz and you start Aaron Rodgers. I'm absolutely done with you, Carson Wentz. You're god-awful. If you can't do it against the Seahawks and Cowboys, you are just a shitty quarterback. You're inconsistent. You probably need to be moved on from if you're the Philadelphia Eagles front office, and they need to give Jalen Hurts a try, because Carson Wentz just ain't it. I don't know what the hell happened to that guy. I really hope the ACL injury is not the reason that we're seeing this happen from Carson Wentz, because Joe Burrow just suffered the same injury. But man, he's just not a very good quarterback. Like, I don't know what else to say. You don't want Carson Wentz in your lineup ever. You never have to want to rely on him. As far as the whole Eagles offense is concerned, Carson Wentz brings the whole thing down, in my opinion. Rodgers has performed in back-to-back weeks, on the other hand, versus the Colts and Bears. So this week should be no exception. The Philadelphia Eagles are a pretty good pass defense based on what they've shown this year, but Rodgers has performed the last 2 weeks against even better pass defenses, so I'm still willing to roll him out there. No concerns there. To the running back position, you start Miles Sanders and you start Aaron Jones. Neither guy has really had a signature like blow-up performance in a while, but you have to think for Sanders, it's this week against the worst run defense and tackling team you'll ever see in the Green Bay Packers. If like Miles Sanders got to do it this week. This is the week he has to have his blow-up game, because this is just we've seen every running back go off against this team. We've seen Ronald Jones go off against this team. We saw Jonathan Taylor go off against this team. Like, running backs that are not supposed to go off like super high are going off against this team. So if Miles Sanders wants to be in that top 10 running back conversation, he has to do it this week. On the other hand, Jones has been a lot more consistent than kind of what I expected out of him, and then what he was last year, but we haven't seen too much of his blow-up performances either. And although I think it's probably because we're seeing a little bit too much of Jamal Williams, but what are you going to do? That's just the way that Matt LaFleur likes to run his offense. You just got to hope for the big plays with Aaron Jones. And he's a great running back, so he'll probably eventually produce those going forward for the rest of the season. To the wide receiver position, you sit all the Philadelphia wide receivers, basically because the same reason I said for Carson Wentz. You couldn't get it done against Seattle, among other teams that you couldn't get it done against. So I'm done with them. I'm done with the passing offense. This time of year is too important to leave up to Carson Wentz and the Philadelphia Eagles play calling to determine your fantasy fate. So Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham, as far as I'm concerned, you could probably drop them. But if you want to keep them on your roster just because you have space, no one else to pick up, then you can go ahead and do that. But I'm not excited about starting any of them anytime soon. On the Packers side of things, obviously, Devontae Adams an every week starter. He will see a lot of Darius Slay, who DK Metcalf absolutely annihilated this past week. And that makes Lazard somewhat interesting. But Alan Lazard is not playing his full snap allotment. He's playing under 50% of the snaps both of the last 2 games since coming back from his injury. So if you play Lazard, you're basically hoping for a desperation like touchdown play like he had last week. He's currently slated to go up against Nickel Roby-Coleman, who actually did a pretty good job against Tyler Lockett last week. I don't really want to start Alan Lazard, but if you want a deep play in a dynasty league or whatever, I think Alan Lazard's an okay play because Devontae Adams might struggle a little bit with Darius Slay. I doubt that, though. So I think Devontae Adams is going to be carrying the passing offense as usual. The tight ends in this game are, on the other hand, are a lot more interesting than the receivers. Dallas Goedert and Robert Tonyan are both starts for me. Goddard might have Ertz back for this game. However, it will be his first game back, if he is back at all, after a multi-week injury. So I expect Dallas Goedert to be the better tight end option, even if Ertz is back. And if Ertz is not back, then obviously he's a great option, as we've seen. Robert Tonyan had a great game against Chicago last week. I think he'll probably have a solid game in this one as well. So you can fire him up as a top 15 guy. All right, now to the first of like 4 straight primetime games here. We have Sunday Night Football, Broncos at Chiefs. Drew Lock in this game. You can stream him, and obviously you start Patrick Mahomes. The highest pace game of the week, as I mentioned, should mean scoring for both Mahomes and Drew Lock, who I think is usable in this game, but not as a high-end option by any means. Melvin Gordon is actually my start of the week at the running back position, and I think you can start CEH as well. The reason Melvin Gordon is my start of the week is Philip Lindsay is banged up. He's expected to play according to Vic Fangio, but Gordon in the Broncos backfield, although it's been rather confusing, we saw Melvin Gordon log an 81% snap share last week, and throughout the course of the season, anytime Lindsay's been banged up or out of the lineup entirely, he's been much better. Last week, we saw Ronald Jones have a great game against the Chiefs. He didn't really see that much volume. He probably should have seen more volume if you're asking me as a Bucs fan, but we saw him go 9 carries for like 60 yards because the Chiefs are very susceptible to the run. You just have to hope that Drew Lock and the Broncos don't get too far behind, that they abandon the run. But even if that happens, Melvin Gordon is the pass catching back. So I expect him to have a decent floor and a pretty high ceiling in this game because he could break a long run or whatever. So Melvin Gordon is my start of the week. I think he's in the top 20 running backs firmly for me. And I'm definitely willing to roll him out there over a guy like Duke Johnson, or I don't know. I'd rather start him over Kareem Hunt, honestly, even this week. So just to give you a sense of where I have Melvin Gordon on the week, hopefully he remains the main back and the game script favors him more than it did last week. As for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Chiefs have been a smart coaching staff that just isn't going to pound CEH if it's not working. Again, coaches don't care about our fantasy teams. They tried to run the ball against the Bucs. It didn't work because the Bucs, generally speaking, do that to everyone. The Bucs are allowing the least rushing yards in the NFL per game, more than anyone, more than the Steelers, more than the Ravens, more than the Colts. They're on a yardage basis, they are the best run defense in the NFL, so they didn't feel the need to just pound CEH. The game plan coming into that game was clearly to attack the corners because it obviously worked. Tyreek Hill went for like 350 fantasy points. So this is a defense, on the other hand, that is much more of a run funnel, allowing top 10 rushing yards to the position and top 10 rushing touchdowns to the position. So we might see a game plan more focused around Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell this week as compared to last week's game plan. So just keep that in mind if you're really worried about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's not like a slam dunk option by any means, like we thought he might have been coming into the season, but he is still a great option to use inside my top 15, I believe, is where I have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I think you could fire him up with confidence this week. To the wide receiver position, you start Tyreek Hill, you flex Jerry Jeudy, and anyone else is just at your own risk. As has been the case all year, Tyreek is the only consistent receiver in the Chiefs receiving corps. If you like anxiety, then go ahead and roll Watkins or Mecole Hardman out there if you're desperate, but I'm going to steer clear of anyone else not named Tyreek Hill on the Chiefs. Prior to as you can see on the matchups there, you have Tyreek Hill against Isang Bassi, just absolutely cake matchup for him. He's probably going to have another big game this week after coming off of like the biggest game in fantasy in a couple of years, I think. The most fantasy points we've seen out of someone. So Tyreek Hill is going to be in for another big one. And I think if you own Tyreek Hill, you just thank your lucky stars that they have an easy schedule the rest of the season, because like Patrick Mahomes makes every schedule easy, so it doesn't even matter. Prior to last week, on the other side of things, Jerry Jeudy, who sees Charvarius Ward in coverage this week, had seen 10, 14, 8, and 8 targets. So yes, I still think he's a flex play, and you should have sat him last week if you had him, because they had a freaking Wake Forest quarterback or wide receiver playing quarterback last week. You shouldn't have started any pass catchers on the Denver Broncos. And I think I would just completely throw that game out for Fant, for Jeudy, for Patrick, for whoever else you're thinking of starting. Jerry Jeudy is a solid start this week if you need someone. To the tight end position, obviously you start Travis Kelce and Noah Fant, as I mentioned, for Jerry Jeudy. You don't take anything away from last week. Noah Fant is going to be a fine option going forward for this week and for the rest of the season. To the next game, Monday Night Football, Washington at Steelers. This is the first of 2 Monday Night Football games that we have this week. In this game, you could stream Ben Roethlisberger, and I would be sitting Alex Smith. Ben is currently my QB 15. I'm not excited about starting him against Washington, their pass defense, but he is a usable option if you need someone to start. To the running back position in this game, we saw Antonio Gibson break out last week. He broke out all over the place on Thanksgiving, and everyone saw it. So everyone's going to know to start Antonio Gibson. I think if you have him in a dynasty league, I don't want to say he's a sell high candidate, but it seems like, man, everyone's just like, this guy's like a top 3 running back in dynasty. Like, it seems like everyone's just ready to put him up there with the Barkleys and the like everyone else. Like, I don't think he's at that point yet. So if people are willing to pay that kind of value for Antonio Gibson in a dynasty league, either right now or at the end of this season, then I honestly low-key might be willing to sell him, because I do think he's a great talent. I do think this offense is going to see a quarterback upgrade and all that kind of stuff, but this is fantasy football, and Gibson is not a sure thing in terms of his production coming from college and all that kind of stuff. And the analytics heads will tell you that what he's doing is not sustainable and all that kind of stuff. But he is clearly a talented running back. I just don't know if I'm willing to put him up in that territory with those elite guys quite yet for dynasty purposes. But for the rest of the season, he played 65% of the snaps last week, 7 targets, 20 carries, and 3 touchdowns. All season highs. Every one of those things is season highs. No hesitation as a back-end RB1 for the rest of the season. Just temper your expectations due to the matchup this week against Pittsburgh. Generally speaking, it's not as good as the matchup he had last week against the Cowboys. The timeline of 10 days for James Conner in this game puts him right up against the return, the thing to return from COVID-19. So my guess is that he's out for this week. 1, because it's a close timeline, and 2, just given James Conner's health history, I think he's going to take a bit longer to recover than most people would. And what we saw yesterday on Wednesday afternoon football was Benny Snell get the bulk of the carries. And as we saw him get 70% of the snaps, 20 opportunities without Conner there, and Anthony McFarland was kind of used sparingly. So Benny Snell is definitely a start if James Conner is out again, which I expect him to be. So I have Benny Snell in my top 26 right now. He's definitely a usable guy. I don't think he's like a crazy great option because he's not really that good, but he's going to get the volume, and he probably has a good chance at a touchdown. So wide receiver wise in this game, you start Terry McLaurin, and you start all 3 Steelers wide receivers. So, or flex all 3 Steelers wide receivers, however you want me to say it. Terry is set to see Steven Nelson in coverage. Giddy up. Terry is probably one of the 10 best receivers in the NFL in terms of talent. So honestly, I'm not worried about him against anyone, but especially not, as I've mentioned, no shadow coverage season for the rest of the season for Terry McLaurin. He's got great matchups going forward for the rest of 2020. So the Steelers guys, on the other hand, we only saw Juju post a decent stat line against Baltimore. This game is kind of another one of those tough matchups where I expect 1 or 2 of these guys to disappoint. But again, you can't really sit any of them. These are the matchups that they have. Deontay Johnson against Kendall Fuller is probably not great. Chase Claypool against Ronald Darby, and Juju Smith-Schuster against Jimmy Moreland. Like, all 3 of those corners have been quite good this year. So I expect maybe it's Claypool game and the other 2 disappoint, or Deontay goes off and the other 2 disappoint. Or maybe Deontay goes off and Juju has an okay game, Chase Claypool disappoints. Like, it's going to be something like that this week. It's not going to be all 3 of them go off, because this is a Washington pass defense that is very stingy against wide receivers. So just keep that in mind. But I do think you can still start all of them. To the tight end position in this game, you stream Logan Thomas and you start Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron has basically been the light version of TJ Hawkinson this season, just uber consistent with his target volume, and a guy that I'm absolutely comfortable with rolling out there every single week. So if you have Eric Ebron, thank you, lucky stars, that you have an every week starter at tight end. And then Logan Thomas gets some volume. He's kind of inconsistent, but he is a streamable option. So I'll mention him real quick. Monday Night Football game number 2. This is the real Monday Night Football game. We have the Bills at 49ers. Start Josh Allen and sit Nick Mullins. It's a meh matchup, but the 49ers are allowing the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season, which bodes well for Josh Allen, who's a guy who generally gets most of his fantasy value from his legs. So Josh Allen could be in for a big rushing day in this one. It could be a coincidence they're allowing a lot of rushing yards to the quarterbacks, but I think it bodes well for Josh Allen regardless. To the running back position in this game, you could flex Zach Moss and you start Raheem Mostert. For Zach Moss, we saw 60% snap share last week, which tells me that he's the lead back. And we've kind of seen that the last couple of weeks where Zach Moss has been the primary running back for this team. I'm not interested in chasing Singletary's production from last week. Just be aware that this backfield can be inconsistent. Determining which guy looks more effective on any given week. I do think it's going to be Moss about 70-80% of the time that I want to start, but sometimes we're just going to get a Devin Singletary game like we got last week. As far as Raheem Mostert is concerned, I think he's kind of on the same lines as Carson. As I mentioned before, he recorded a season low in snaps coming off of the injury, but he still received great volume. So this matchup is much easier than the Rams last week, and he should be back to his full workload, his full allotment of snaps, all that kind of stuff that made him the RB8 in points per game before last week's matchup against the Rams. To the wide receiver position in this game, you could start both 49ers wide receivers. You start Stephon Diggs, and I think you sit Cole Beasley in this game. At first glance, you might be thinking, and when you look at the matchup chart right now, you can see Brandon Ayuk is on Levi Wallace, Deebo Samuel on Teron Johnson. At first glance, you might be like, why would Tre'Davious White not be on one of these two guys? But that's exactly what happened last week. What the Chargers did last week against the Buffalo Bills was they deployed their receivers so that they would avoid Tre'Davious White. They put Jalen Guyton where Tre'Davious White was so that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen would be freed up of him. And I think both of these two guys, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, are startable as top 30 options this week, especially the way that Deebo came out and absolutely torched a great pass defense last week. That's very encouraging to see for the offense's sake, for Ayuk's sake, for Deebo's sake. This passing offense is about to get a lot better. This offense in general is going to get a lot better now that Raheem Mostert is back and Brandon Ayuk is back and Deebo Samuel is back. Aside from George Kittle, they have their full offense back pretty much. So I think Nick Mullins is actually going to become a kind of interesting streamer going forward for the rest of the season in good matchups because he actually has some weapons now. So on the other side of the field, you have Stephon Diggs, who's the only receiver I'm willing to start for the Buffalo Bills. No slot receivers have done well against San Francisco, regardless of if it was Kawon Williams or Emmanuel Mosley in the slot. So I'm not starting Cole Beasley. I don't know why ECR, along with Christian Kirk, has him in the top 30. I know John Brown's out, but I'm not excited about Cole Beasley, whether John Brown's in or out of the game. And honestly, I think he's actually better when John Brown is in because this offense, generally speaking, takes a hit and Josh Allen plays worse when John Brown has been out of the game. So I think Beasley, who's had like 2 good games this year, is like a low end flex play at best. I don't see him as like a top 30 option like ECR seems to see him that way. I have him like 15 spots lower than ECR at like wide receiver 42. So just keep that in mind with Beasley. I don't think he's just suddenly this great option. To the tight end position, Jordan Reed is a streamer. I'd love to be able to say that now that Deebo and Ayuk are back, we should avoid Jordan Reed. But as I mentioned, the offense has gotten better. And the position of the tight end is just that bad that Jordan Reed is still a top 16 option. I think you can use him if you need to. All right, finally, and I know this was a long video, but we had a lot to get to. Cowboys at Ravens, Tuesday Night Football. Quarterback-wise in this game, you can sit Andy Dalton and you start Lamar Jackson if he's back. If Lamar is back for this game, he should be cleared the protocol based on the timelines if I had to guess, but we really don't know quite yet if he's kicking off. He's going to be kicking off an excellent stretch of his schedule if he is back for this game. He's got the Cowboys, he's got the Browns coming up. He's got a number of easy defenses that he's going to be playing. And that bodes well for him as well as the rest of the offense because the better of the offense, the better Dobbins is going to be, the better Andrews is going to be, all that kind of stuff. So speaking of J.K. Dobbins, you start him and then you start Ezekiel Elliott. I have never had Ezekiel Elliott as low in the rankings as I have him right now. He sits at my RB22 and for good reason. He's just too inconsistent. That's basically what Zeke Elliott has been this year. He's never been a guy who's been too inconsistent over the course of his career, but this year, that's what he's been. He fumbles all the time, seemingly. And on top of that, the Ravens defense is just not good. It's not kind to running backs. The running backs are not playing well against the Ravens defense. So I'll play guys like Damian Harris, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Wayne Gallman, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins in this game, all over Ezekiel Elliott if I have the choice of sitting one of those guys. As for J.K. Dobbins, he didn't play Wednesday. We thought he might have played. They said going into the game, him and Mark Ingram are going to fly on like a separate plane and all this kind of stuff. And he might be playing in this game, but that didn't happen. He didn't end up like kind of clearing the protocol or whatever in time. So we expected Gus Edwards to get a huge workload, and that didn't happen. It was an even split, 27-26 for Gus Edwards and Justice Hill yesterday. And I think that bodes well for J.K. Dobbins. And the reason I say that is because they basically just subbed Justice Hill into J.K. Dobbins' role, if not gave him a bit less of a role. But I think that's a good thing because had Gus Edwards gotten a 90% touch share and looked really good, they might have dialed back J.K. Dobbins' role a little bit because Gus Edwards was playing well the week before. So the fact that Gus Edwards wasn't very effective and Justice Hill was like kind of good, I guess, but J.K. Dobbins coming back, let me just remind you, in week 11, when we saw J.K. Dobbins' breakout game, 63% of the snaps, 77% of the running back opportunities, 100% of the running back touches inside the 10-yard line, 5 out of 6 in the red zone, including a 2-point conversion, and 60% of the running back routes. I said it at the time and I jinxed it because he got COVID right after I tweeted this, but we've teased it once before. But I promise you, once J.K. Dobbins is back, it is officially J.K. Dobbins season, RB1 season for J.K. Dobbins coming up, especially with the schedule that they have. Hopefully, Lamar Jackson is back too, because this offense, whether we want to admit it or not, is better with Lamar Jackson, obviously, because Robert Griffin III and Tracy McSorley ain't it. So wide receiver wise in this game, you sit Hollywood Brown, you start Amari Cooper, you sit CeeDee Lamb. I know it's tempting, but this week is just too important to leave up to Marquise Brown in a Tuesday game. He has a good matchup against Jordan Lewis, but in my opinion, he's a showdown DFS lineup only type of guy for me in this game. It's a bad matchup for the Cowboys, which means only Cooper is startable. I don't want any part of CeeDee Lamb against Marlon Humphrey. As you can see the matchup there, he's going up against Marlon Humphrey. Amari Cooper against Marcus Peters is not a good matchup either, but Amari Cooper's volume has been safe enough that I'm still willing to start Amari Cooper. To the tight end position in this game, finally, we have Mark Andrews. If he plays, Andrews, much like James Conner, has complications with COVID. Mark Andrews has COVID-19, and he also has diabetes. So this is a situation where, one, we just hope Mark Andrews is okay and he recovers from COVID-19 quickly. But hopefully he can recover fully and is back out there, because his timeline probably is pushed back a little bit because of his health complications. So I don't expect him to be back for this game. But if he is, obviously you put him out there. If he isn't back, don't go screwing around with any other tight ends like Luke Wilson or something. But you're going to have to find other options if Mark Andrews is not back for this game. And we should know by Sunday if he's going to be playing in this Tuesday game or not. And then Dalton Schultz, on the other hand, I think you can stream him. I'm not really excited about it because the Ravens defense is quite good. But you can stream him if you need to, I guess. Anyway, that was a long-winded episode. Sorry for you guys that I had to stick around for like an hour and 10 minutes or however long this ends up being. But if you made it to the end of this video, please leave a like, comment any of your thoughts down below. If you made it to the end of this video, comment down below LT, so I know that you are a true fan and you have truly stayed committed to the end of this video. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your Thursday. Good luck in week 13.